Welcome to Experimental Psychology. Still your instructor, Angelo M. de Monteverde. And we have now the mm, part number 3, which is the quasi-experimental and faulty experimental designs. And we already done discussing this one. And what we need to do now is to discuss naman itong quasi at faulty experimental. Overview, we're done discussing that one sa previous slides video natin. For quasi-experimental design, quasi means as if or a degree. Quasi-experiment, an experiment does not meet all the requirements necessary controlling the influence of extraneous variable. Okay, so for quasi-experimental, participant variables such as age, sex, etc. cannot be experimentally manipulated. Okay, so maaring hindi natin ilagay yung age, sex, at hindi natin siya i-manipulate. Okay, so participants can't be randomly assigned to a particular condition. Ibig sabihin, hindi tayo pwedeng wala itong randomly assignment. Kung anong grupo yung gusto natin kunin, yun yung kukunin natin. Instead, they are exposed to a condition because they already qualify for that condition. Ibig sabihin, qualify na kasi yung participants mo doon. So, hindi mo na kailangan pang mag-randomly assign para doon. Okay? We also have the experimenter can only select instances that satisfy different categories and study them. Use natural manipulation rather than manipulation by the researcher. Okay? So, kasi nga, meron na tayong kinukuha na participant na align dun sa gusto nating kunin. Halimbawa, grupo. Pero hindi natin sinusukat or sinasama dun yung gender, sex, and the likes. Manipulation could be naturally occurring attribute or events. Example, ethnic group, age, sex, intelligence, etc. Okay? Sometimes called ex-post facto or after the fact experiment. The experiment is conducted after the groups have been formed. Halimbawa, sa quasi-experimental, nagkakandak tayo ng experiment kapag may nabuo na tayong grupo. Hindi na tayo mag-randomly assign pa. Okay? Ng grupo na gusto nating kukunin bago tayo mag-conduct like through experiment. Tile group. Okay? Through experiment. Like through experimental research design. Okay? So, in quasi-experiment, example, investigating the effect of practice on performance will require a true experimental design. Okay? So, yung effect performance will require ng true experimental design, investigating the effect of practice on performance. The effect of practice and gender and performance will require a combination ng true and experimental design kay quasi-experimental. Okay? Kung dito kay true experiment, randomly, okay, dito mapapansin na not randomly kasi meron na tayong gender, may kasama siyang gender. Okay? Next, in quasi-experimental versus experimental, major difference niya ay random assignment of participants to experimental groups. In true experiment but not in quasi. Ibig sabihin, in quasi, hindi tayo mag-randomly assign ng, dito ka ha, itong, kunyari, meron tayo sa isang section, hatiin natin siya sa dalawa. Okay? Sa dalawa na yon, sa quasi-experiment, hindi na tayo maghahati or mag-randomly assign pa ng katulad ng true experiment. Kay quasi, ay yung isang buong section na yun, kukunin na siya natin. Okay? Experimenter manipulates variables in true experiment but observes category participants in quasi-experiments. In true experiments, control permits the establishment of cause and effect relationship. Okay? In quasi, cannot be determined whether the difference in behavior is caused by independent variable or difference between the two groups. Okay? So, kasi nga, kay quasi, ay kinukuha natin yung sa may, dahil sa naka-form na siya into group, hindi na natin tinitingnan doon yung difference niya to the other group. Kasi nga, ay meron tayong specific group na gusto natin kinuha. Halimbawa, kung ang grupo na yun is composed ng male and female, okay, hindi magmamatter doon yung age, gender, and the likes niya. And example is the IQ level, okay, or GPA. Hindi magmamatter kay quasi-experimental. Kaya, mas madali gamitin si quasi-experimental kaysa kay true experimental. However, kay true experimental, mas hawak mo ang manipulation kasi ikaw yung mismo nagmamanipulate ng participants na gusto mo. Kung gusto mo ay lalaki lang, ang GPA niya dapat ay ganito. Okay? So, mas mataas yung instance na manipulate mo si true experimental. Next, in types of quasi-experimental, there are two types ng quasi-experimental design. Merong equivalent control group at saka non-equivalent pre-test post-test design. Dito, kay non-equivalent control group design, the performance of an experiment group is compared with the non-equivalent control group. There is no random assignment of subject pa rin, so the groups are not given equivalent. Groups are not randomly equal. Meaning to say, pwedeng mas onti si experimental, mas mataas si control group mo. Okay? So, here, example, the effect of stress management on hypertensive patients. Dito, hindi ka na mag-randomly assignment ng hypertensive patients kasi meron ka specific na patients na gusto mo makuha. Which is, yung qualification niya ay yung mga hypertensive. Magkakanda ka ng experiment ng the effect of stress management sa mga hypertensive patients. Gusto mo makita kung bababa ang level na mini-measure mo kapag in-apply mo si stress management. An experimenter may recruit willing hypertensive patients who have served as the experimental group and are administered stress management. The experimenter later recruits more hypertensive patients to serve as a control group. Okay? So, same sila. Meron kang control group at saka meron kang experimental group dito. Alright. Next would be types of quasi-experimental. Thus, the two groups are not equated. Differences found between the two groups may be as a result of the stress management or differences between the group. Okay? So, kasi nga, ay hindi mo alam kung ang result ba netong dalawa na to ay due to stress management kapag after mga post-test or result dahil sa hindi mo siya ni-randomly assign. Okay? Or hindi mo ni-randomly assign yung participants mo based siguro sa age. Okay? Baka naka-apekto yun. Okay? So, depende yun sa researcher kung gagamitin niya si quasi-experimental, kung mag-randomly assign siya or not randomly assign. Yun lang yung difference ng dalawa. This design is similar to the true experiment post-test only. Meron din tayong ganun kay quasi-experimental. Similar sila. Halimbawa, sa pre-test score mo is 70%. Tapos, kay experimental, tapos kay control group ay 40%, mas mababa, magkakanda ka dito ng post-test, pero meron siyang intervention tapos post-test. Dito is wala siyang intervention pero may post-test. Ngayon, i-compare mo kung may pinagkaiba ba ang experimental mo kay control group. Okay? Dito naman, ay differences ng experimental versus quasi-experiments. So, kay true experiments, meron tayong intervention implemented. Okay? Pareha sila meron. Kay true experiment, high degree of control. Kasi random assignment, makokontrol mo kung sino yung participants na gusto mo. It differs from age, sex, kung saan siya grupo, IQ level, Okay? Depende yun sa kung anong gusto mong mangyari. Dito, lack of degree and lack of random assignment. Kasi nga, kukuha tayo ng grupo na gusto nating makuha or either yung qualities na meron sila pero hindi na magmamatter doon yung sex, religion, IQ level, and the likes. Okay? So, hindi natin malalaman kung kaya ka, halimbawa, nag, nag-assign ka ng experiment about stress management. Tapos, may sabi ng facts mo na mabilis makapag-cope up ang mga student na mas mataas ang stress kesa sa hindi mas madaling mag-cope up ang mga mataas ang IQ level sa mga taong nakakaranas ng stress. Okay? Compare mo dun sa hindi mababa yung IQ level tapos may stress. So, hindi natin malalaman kung effective ba talaga yung experiment mo because of the intervention na kinandak mo or the experiment na kinandak mo kay Quasi. Kasi nga, hindi siya randomly assigned. Okay, kumuha ka lang ng isang grupo na yun na yun. Hindi mo minatter doon yung age, gender, IQ level, and the likes. Okay? In natural setting can be difficult to obtain permission and access. Okay? So, mahirap gamitin si true experimental in national setting. Kasi nga, marami kang qualifications na gusto mong mahanap. Alternative, when true experiment is not possible. So, kung, kunyari, hindi ka makakuha ng participants na gusto mo na kailangan ganito ang sex, ganito ang age, ganito ang ethnic group na pinanggalingan, pwede mong gamitin si quasi experiment. Okay? So, meron tayong example. Halimbawa, Jell is interested in scents and the effect they have on the people's behavior. He decided he was going to randomly assign 10 people to smell each scent and then their behavior to see if the good scents made people in good mood or bad mood. So, dito, makikita na nag-randomly assign ka. Okay? Kinuha mo kaya siya naging true experimental kasi nag-randomly assign ka. Okay? We discussed na kung ano yung randomly assign. Diba? Okay? So, dito naman, example to ng quasi-experimental design. Dr. Mark, like Jello, is interested in scent and effects they have on behavior. He decides to assign one group of students based on their academic standing to smell the pleasant scent if they have high status or smell the unpleasant smell if they have low academic status. He will then compare the result. So meaning, dito sa quasi-experimental, ang mangyayari dito ay kumuha ka ng participant sa isang buong classroom. Tapos, kinuha mo yung level ng IQ nila. However, pwede mo din naman siyang hindi kunin. Okay? Kung hindi specific, ito na experimental, lagi natin tatandaan na specific tayo. Specific yung age group, specific yung ethnic group, IQ level kung gusto natin makuha. Kay quasi-experimental, dahil nga mahirap ito makandak in natural setting kasi limited lang, ay pwedeng substitute natin si quasi-experimental. Hindi na natin i-matter doon kung nagbago ba ang experiment because of experiment talaga or because sa mga confounding variable niya. Ano yung mga confounding variable? Yung age group, okay? Ethnic group, okay? IQ level, okay? Kasi yung mga ganung bagay ay nagmamatter din sa experiment, okay? And hope you learn sa difference between the experimental and kay quasi-experimental. Now, we already know the difference. Let's move to topic number 2, which is the faulty experiment or faulty experimental designs. Faulty experimental design usually do not have a control or do not include the pretest. Okay? There's an internal invalidity as a result or not minimizing the exchange's variables. They should therefore be avoided by a researcher. Okay? Almost same with one-shot design. However, administered lang ito sa group. Kasi si one-shot, usually, meron tayong ina-administer natin siya sa may AB, AB, ABA, ABAB design. Dito naman ay, kung yun ay applicable for minimal number of participants, okay, dito naman ay magagawa natin siya by group. Two types of faulty research design. One group post-test or only design, and one group pre-test, post-test design. Ano to? Kay one group post-test only design, an experimental group is administered the independent variable and then tested on the dependent variable. There is no comparison group or test measure. At minimum participants should be pre-tested. Also, an equivalent control group must be included. Kay faulty experimental design, this is the independent variable. Meron tayong experimental group, magpapasok tayo ng intervention or ng treatment or independent variable natin is listening to music. Tapos, kay control group naman, titingnan natin siya mamaya. Okay? Or titingnan natin after ng magpasok tayo ng intervention. Okay? Alright. So, dito, balikan natin yung kanina. Okay? The effect of type of music on mood. Okay? Yun yung gusto natin makita. So, meron tayong experimental group, tapos, independent variable, bibigyan natin siya ng listening to music. Okay? Tapos, meron tayong experimental group. Okay? Sa experimental group, lalagyan natin siya ng intervention or ng treatment. Titingnan natin ngayon kung may effect ba itong music na to kapag nagpasok tayo ng intervention. So, one group post-test only design kasi wala tayong pre-test dito. Okay? Next, one group pre-test post-test. Ibig sabihin dito, may pre-test tayo, may post-test tayo. Okay, the effect of an independent variable is inferred from the pre-test post-test. Differences in a single group. The design is faulty because it does not take into account extraneous variables such as history, maturation, etc. Also, there is no control group para mag-compare kung working nga ba si experimental group. Okay? Lagi natin tatandaan na kapag faulty experiment, wala tayong control group. Lagi lang tayong merong experimental group, tapos magpapasok tayo ng variable, tapos titingnan natin siya o kung paano ito makaka-apekto. Dito, sa one group post-test only, wala tayong pre-test. Kaya nga siya post-test only design. Pero, may pinasok tayo sa kanyang independent variable, which is listening to music. Tingnan natin kung magbabago yung mood niya kapag nagpasok tayo ng variable na or ng independent variable. Kay post-test group ay kay one group pre-test post-test, meron tayong ipinapasok na pre-test at meron tayong post-test after natin mag-measure ng independent variable. Okay? So may treatment dito parehas, pero both sila, wala silang control group. Okay? Example, a black manufacturing factory decides to change their work schedule from 8 hours a day to 10 hours a day. If there is an improvement in productivity, it does not definitely mean this is because of the increase in the number of hours. Other potential causes such as favorable weather condition, attention, paid employees when the change was initiated, etc. can also increase productivity. Okay? Kasi nga, wala tayong, may pinasok lang tayo, pero wala tayong control group na magko-compare kung nag-increase nga ba yung productivity nila? Kaya mahalaga may control group. Ayun lang yung sa faulty experimental design and other na itinakal natin. So, this is the last lesson ng research design ng true experimental. Hope you learned something, and if you have clarification, if you have question, please don't hesitate to ask during synchronous and asynchronous, since that i-discuss pa rin na naman natin to. So, again, thank you for listening.